Good evening, and thanks for joining me. I'm Candace Wen. We begin in San Francisco with the sinking and leaning Millennium Tower. The downtown building is getting close to the limit of being safe and stable during an earthquake, according to the engineer hired to stop the high-rise from sinking any further. Our investigative reporter Jackson Vanderbecken shows you just how razor thin the margin has become.
Last month, crews bored holes at this corner where the Millennium Tower is sinking the most to test the soil and install new monitors. Work on the project designed to stop the sinking was already halted when engineers realized it was actually causing the building to sink faster. Now, engineer Ron Hamburger, who designed the so-called fix, wants to do a far more elaborate test, sinking a new support pile down to bedrock, which he concedes could trigger more sinking.
That's a pretty big deal.
Rune Storsund, head of the Center for Catastrophic Risk Management at UC Berkeley, says that may be too big a risk.
We're missing something here, right? So we need to stop, figure out what it is that we're missing. Otherwise, we're just kind of guessing what's going to happen off into the future.
Keep in mind, each inch of sinking translates into 4 to 5 more inches of leaning at the top of the tower. And in this letter to the city, Hamburger acknowledges the building can't handle much more and still be considered safe and stable in an earthquake. Right now, the tower tilts 22.5 inches west towards Fremont Street and 9 inches north towards Mission. The building can only tilt 29 inches toward Fremont and 12 inches towards Mission and remain safe and stable. Hamburger expects at most a 1/4 of an inch of new settlement during the work without much new tilting. We do not anticipate that any settlements likely to occur during the pilot installation will pose a threat to the building, Hamburger told city officials. But Storsund worries about the uncertainties.
If we only have an inch left before things take a turn for the worse, there's not a lot of room for error.
This close to a boundary between safe and not safe, yeah, that should be really, really worrisome.
Engineer and Professor Keith Porter develops and evaluates seismic performance standards. He says the safe and stable margin is now so narrow that engineers should be planning for what to do if the tower tilts beyond that level.
Or are we just hoping? We're going to do this and hope nothing bad happens, and if something bad happens, oh well.
Hamburger is assuring city officials that an engineer will have the authority to stop the test work if the predicted settlement effects are exceeded. Jackson Vanderbecken, NBC, Bay Area News.
In response to all the concerns about resuming any work at that building, Millennium Tower officials have now hired an independent expert to advise the city and Homeowners Association on whether it's safe to continue down the path of the fix engineers want to go. If the consultant gives the okay, crews could start drilling to insert that test pile down to bedrock around mid-October. We'll stay on top of any developments and keep you posted. Turning now to wildfires. Why have they become so fierce and frequent in California? Reporting by our investigative unit is now leading to government hearings in Washington, D.C. Over the past 2 years, senior investigative reporter Begad Shaban has been digging into what's fueling our historic fires, and it's caught the attention of a Bay Area congressman.
Well, this all has to do with burned trees and what we choose to do with them after a wildfire. The wrong answer could actually leave California communities at higher risk of being caught in future fires. Here's the problem. The federal government and top scientists across the country can't seem to agree on the solution. The U.S. Forest Service believes burned trees will eventually become fuel for future fires and should be removed and sold off to lumber companies. But a growing number of scientists disagree, arguing dead trees should be left alone, since they can absorb moisture from the soil and actually slow down wildfires. Palo Alto Congressman Ro Khanna, who chairs the House Environment Subcommittee, took note of our reporting and now plans to summon top Forest Service officials and leading scientists to D.C. for a government hearing. He plans to force both sides to develop a comprehensive plan to better protect California. The congressman sat down with us for an exclusive interview. When it comes to developing any kind of consensus relating to post-fire logging and how to best protect California from future wildfires, it frankly seems like the federal government is failing.
It is. Well, your report was very helpful. It triggered us to seek out scientific expertise. We're going to have a hearing on wildfires, and we need to understand the proper policies. Right now, it's a very small group of Beltway insiders that have come up with these plans, and it benefits a lot of commercial industry. And anytime you're going against commercial interests in Washington, it's very, very difficult. But I believe our hearings, which will have the scientists in, which will have the forest management in, will finally help break through the logjam and say we need to have consensus and we need a new approach.
There is a long list of highly educated scientists from all across the country that not only disagree with how the Forest Service responds to wildfires, but they actually think that what the Forest Service is doing is putting people's lives in danger.
They are if you're making the wildfires worse because you're taking down trees and you're increasing the spread and you're increasing the severity, then that is putting, by definition, more people's lives at risk.
But the U.S. Forest Service is frankly convinced what it's doing now and has been doing for the past 100 years is right.
Well, I would say look at the results. I mean, if you're doing something and you have awful consequences and the wildfires are bad and getting worse, you have to have some accountability. I mean, if someone keeps saying we're doing the best we can and the situation gets worse, maybe you want to have a new approach.
Each year, about $45 million of the U.S. Forest Service's budget is funded through commercial logging. Does that need to change?
I think that we need to look at that, absolutely. I mean, that creates a potential conflict of interest. And $45 million in the scheme of the federal budget is not a lot of money. And so if we need to have direct allocation from the federal government to fund that so that there isn't that perceived conflict of interest, let's do that. But that is something we will be exploring in the hearing.
After our original investigation into this issue, you wrote the Forest Service asking them to reduce post-fire logging and rethink its policies. That was 2 years ago. What's happened since, and are you satisfied?
I'm not satisfied. Now, that was during the Trump administration. We have a new administration, so we plan to pursue whether they will take that into consideration under President Biden. They didn't do much with it, candidly, under Trump.
How do you get both sides to come to a consensus?
Well, we finally are going to have the forest management sitting right there under oath, and they're going to hear from scientists who have deep concerns about commercial logging. We will make sure people read your reporting, and we will have this conversation in public in the committee, and then the committee will issue a report on what we think can be done to have a consensus policy. I don't think it's for Congress to choose which scientist is right. But what we can make a push for is that commercial interests aren't dictating this, that all of the scientific perspectives are being considered, and that there is some consensus that emerges.
A date hasn't yet been set for the hearings, but Congressman Khanna hopes to hold them in the early part of the new year. So the federal government has enough time to reevaluate its logging practices before the start of next year's fire season. With the investigative unit, I'm Begat Chaban.
From police shootings to COVID-19, more families are facing unexpected loss and unanswered questions about how their loved ones died. Next, we investigate the unregulated industry of private autopsies and people accused of taking money without providing any real answers. Here's something we didn't hear much about until the pandemic hit. Private autopsies. From medical malpractice to police shootings to COVID-19, the cause of someone's death can have serious legal and public health ramifications. And yet families we spoke to say some of those deaths are being seen as dollar signs. We investigate a network of people accused of performing private autopsies, even though they aren't even doctors.
I held his finger, he squeezed my finger, and it was just perfect. Everything that I was told, I felt like they lied to me.
When Natasha Robinson's newborn son, Nassim, passed away in Oakland in 2018, she had questions for the hospital.
We were told he was okay, and then all of a sudden things changed and we didn't know what happened.
Her suspicions grew.
I got a bad vibe from the doctor.
Natasha wanted a second opinion and sought out an independent investigation of her son's death. she found Sean Parcells.
Hi, my name is Sean Parcells.
Parcells owns National Autopsy Services. Natasha read on his website the company consisted of unbiased experts who give families an opportunity to learn what happened to their loved ones. Natasha paid $2,600 and National Autopsy Services sent someone to examine Nasim's body at Chapel of the Chimes in Oakland. That was 3 years ago.
To this day, what's the status?
I have no clue. I have nothing.
Has he returned any of your calls or emails?
No.
Natasha had a hunch the autopsy was unprofessional. Then she learned it wasn't performed by a licensed doctor, as required by law in California. Natasha says she met the man the company sent, and he was just an assistant.
The coroner said no. Said if you want an autopsy done, then you can pay for a private one.
Alicia Nettleton also hired National Autopsy Services after her 55-year-old mother suddenly died in a hospital. She says the report she received from Parcells' company was filled with errors.
I knew that her eye color was blue, and he had put that it was brown.
Robinson and Nettleton are suing National Autopsy Services, saying it negligently failed to retain a licensed physician. The women are among a half-dozen families across California the investigative unit spoke to, accusing not just Parcells, but a network of people of running a number of unlicensed predatory autopsy businesses.
It's about time that somebody exposes this.
Vidal Herrera has been in the private autopsy business for 33 years. He says he witnessed firsthand the lack of oversight of his industry. He says in 2019, he found out one of his assistants was doing autopsies without a license for other companies.
And I told him, you're going to get in trouble. And I know you're working for this company, and this is going to catch up to you.
Herrera says he reported the assistant to an investigator with the California Medical Board, but doesn't know if anyone followed up. The board wouldn't tell us either, but said they can fine unlicensed examiners and forward cases to district attorneys.
I've called the medical board. They don't care. They don't have time. That's why I say they're worthless.
We reached out to Parcells and his attorneys, but no one got back to us. In court documents, his company denied the allegations.
Well, that's certainly very concerning.
Richard Pan is a medical doctor and a state senator representing the Sacramento region. In 2016, he helped pass a law clarifying only licensed doctors can conduct autopsies. After we showed him our findings, he said more enforcement may be needed.
Given some of the findings that you described, it appears that perhaps there may need to be more protections. The question is that are there existing laws that aren't being enforced, or do we need additional laws?
It's hard.
Either way, Natasha wishes she had those protections. It's been years, and she says it's still hard to move on.
Every blue moon, I'll just press his teddy bear because that's his original heartbeat. I took maternity pictures, so that day just flashed every time I hear his heartbeat.
Are you still looking for answers?
Yeah.
Federal prosecutors have indicted Sean Parcells, saying he took money from at least 375 clients, totaling more than $1 million. Parcells is prohibited from operating in Kansas, where he's based, but Herrera says pathologist technicians like the one he had contact with are still able to operate here in California without a license. Up next, questions over the future of the state's troubled high-speed rail project. We investigate whether the money will run out before it's even built. As Congress debates the largest infrastructure bill in decades, what does it mean for California's biggest project, high-speed rail? Senior investigative reporter Stephen Stock dug into the numbers, and he found even this unprecedented spending bill may not be able to save the bullet train.
After years of battling with property owners, the Trump administration, and a global pandemic, the High-Speed Rail Authority is now coming under fire from more state lawmakers who say this train is heading in the wrong direction. If you travel down Highway 99 in the Central Valley, you can see the promise of high-speed rail beginning to take form. Viaducts and cranes outline this initial 171-mile segment that's expected to take riders from Merced to Bakersfield by 2029. But a growing number of decision makers in Sacramento are now starting to question if we're spending billions on a train to nowhere.
I think the if you build it, they will come is theory is pure fantasy.
Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon from L.A. County fears that people in his district may never see any benefits from this project.
I was down in Fresno probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. You see that same piece of track that I saw last year, the year before, the year before that, the year before that. So that is, in and of itself, seems to be this sort of monument to high-speed rail. Maybe they can turn it into a sculpture if we don't go much further than where we are right now.
Do you worry we're not going to go any further? That we're dead in the water or close to it?
I'm worried that we're dead in the water. I'm also worried that we have what would be a laughing stock for California.
Speaker Rendon wants to divert the rest of the money earmarked for high-speed rail to upgrade public transit that's already operating in the Bay Area and in Southern California. Rendon believes there's now enough opposition to the project that he has the votes to do it.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result.
In March, the High-Speed Rail Authority presented its latest business plan to the legislature. According to the plan, the agency has access to around $20 billion over the next 10 years, just enough money to finish building the Central Valley section of the overall project. Lawmakers would then have to raise an additional $50 to $80 billion through taxes or fees to build the rest of the system, the part that connects it all to San Francisco and L.A. Speaker Rendon says he's not prepared to raise another penny until he sees a new plan.
We think it's foolhardy, given all the problems with the program. We think it's foolhardy to spend the remainder of the money without a sense of how the project is going to flow.
That is the same conversation about this project for the last 10 years.
Brian Kelly is the CEO of the High-Speed Rail Authority. For the past 2 years, he's been in negotiations with Washington to restore nearly $1 billion in funding pulled by the Trump administration for failure to meet construction deadlines. Now Kelly is facing another battle with Sacramento.
And the bottom line is this: do you have key benefits by getting this done here? We do. And I'll tell you this, the other thing I don't want to do. Nobody wants to leave it partially constructed in the valley. And so as we finish that work and it's constructed, the question at some point has to be, now that you've done that, what do you have? And I want to have electrified high-speed rail.
The impasse with state lawmakers is just the latest setback for a project that's had a year of challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic slowed the pace of construction as more than 300 workers were forced to quarantine. And in May, COO Joe Hedges suddenly resigned after 3 years on the job, a move that came with few details released to the public.
Well, look, I'm not going to comment much on a personnel matter, but I'll just say Joe Hedges, our CEO, did a lot of work here to help us advance this project.
As the agency searches for Hedges' replacement, Kelly believes he can work with lawmakers to advance public transit in all regions of the state while keeping the high-speed rail project moving forward as well.
For us, it's not this or that, it's both. So I respect the legislature. We got to work through these issues, and we're not in full agreement yet, but we'll get there.
We're determined to make sure we'll push for more money, but as long as it's a project that's accountable.
Under President Obama, high-speed rail received 2 grants totaling $3.4 billion. The agency now plans to ask for more federal dollars if President Biden's infrastructure deal gets passed. Meanwhile, Assembly Speaker Rendon believes he has enough support in the Assembly to block all future funding in next year's budget if he doesn't see a new business plan. This is a story we will continue to stay on top of. I'm Stephen Stock, NBC Bay Area News.
We'll be right back to show you how you can contact us if you have a tip. If you have a story for our investigative unit, call 888-996-TIPS or visit our website, nbcbayarea.com/investigations. That's all the time we have this evening, but our team will continue digging to get you answers and hold the powerful accountable. Because here at NBC Bay Area, we investigate. I'm Candace Wen. We'll see you soon.